I am Cameron Dutro. I'm giving a talk today on what I'm calling active deployment for Rails apps. So first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming. This is amazing. This is, I think, the third talk I've given at RailsConf, but I haven't given one in 4 or 5 years. So I'm feeling the nerves right now. I appreciate all you smiling, yet covered faces. So who am I? Cameron Dutro. I work at GitHub. A couple of my coworkers sitting in the very front. Thanks, guys. Pronouns, he, him, his. I am the dad to these two adorable goofballs, Hallie and Mona. It's actually kind of a miracle that I get to be here today because both of them are under 3, and so my heroic wife told me, hey, you got a talk accepted to RailsConf. Go ahead and go, and I'll take care of them. So if we could get a round of applause for Kelly, that would be amazing. I'm also a huge Seahawks fan, so please come up and talk to me about how terrible they're going to be this year. So we all know that Rails is awesome. We've been told numerous times, we all get it. We're all sitting in this room, in this building together. Why is that? Well, Rails is really easy to get into. We have active record, makes it easy to access the database layer. Developing is super fast and easy. We've got a fantastic directory structure Rails gives us as a right place for every file. We have tons of community-provided libraries, and the community in general is fantastic. I mean, all the people I've met here have been absolutely fantastic. And if you listen to David, you know that also it's great because it's not Java. But the problem with Rails as I see it when it comes to deployment is that when it's time to deploy, this is kind of what Rails does for you. So the unfortunate truth is that Rails has no official tool or guide to aid in deploying an app to production. In other words, there's no active record for deploying your app. In 2019, Stefan Vintermeyer came on the Ruby Rogues podcast, number 403, and made a couple of observations that I think are really important and sort of have guided my efforts toward remedying this in the Rails world. I'll just read this out. It says, he said, "In my experience, deployment is one of the major problems of normal Rails users. It's a big pain to set up a deployment system for a Rails application, and I don't see anything out there that makes it easier." Rails is sort of famous for having a really good learning, or really not steep, a shallow, I guess, learning curve. And he says also that, "I believe that we lose quite a lot of companies and new developers on this step, because everything else is so much easier with Rails, but that last step, and it's a super important step, is still super complicated." So what are our options for deploying a Rails app? Well, a lot of us love Heroku, and I am not here to tell you Heroku is bad. Heroku rules, but it can get pretty expensive over time. You add more dynos, your database size increases, and you start to pay, and then you start to pay more and more and more. You could, of course, go the bare metal route, get an EC2 instance in AWS, use Capistrano maybe. That's difficult to set up, though. Even though Capistrano is a wonderful tool, it can be difficult to set it up effectively. And I always get it wrong the first time. You could do something like an EC2 instance with Chef, Puppet, Ansible, any of these server provisioning and management tools. There's so much to learn there, though. There's a whole separate community around deployment, around setting up servers using these tools. And last but not least, you could also use a hosted solution like Render or Fly or Cloud 66, or as I mentioned before, Heroku. And these are great tools, of course, too, but there's a lot of vendor lock-in. That's one of the nice things about Capistrano. It's all your own code. It's all your own infrastructure. There's no worrying about vendor lock-in. You can take your Heroku script or Heroku tasks to another provider and use them over there without any problems. Recently, DHH and the Rails core team have changed their website to say that now Rails scales from hello world to IPO. And that's great, but I would love to see somebody get to an IPO without being able to deploy their app to production. So let's talk about our journey today. So we're going to talk about what deployment is, what's changed in the way we as web developers deploy apps over the last 20 years or so, what we're currently using as Rails devs for deployment, and then at the end of the talk, I want to talk about a tool that I've written called Kuby that I want to sort of posture as active deployment for Rails. Okay, so what is deployment? Well, you built a great website. You want other people to be able to see it. What do you need to make that happen? Well, first of all, you need a computer, potentially a server, hopefully one that somebody else runs, not you, and maintains. And you also need some software that listens for requests, invokes your code, sends back the response to the browser. You also might need a domain name. That includes going to some registrar, getting mycoolsite.com, whatever your domain name is. And you also might need some persistent storage, like a database. This is all pretty standard. I think most of us would sort of intuitively understand these are the things that you would need to put a website onto the internet for other people to see. So I'm going to talk about my deployment journey and sort of where I came from and why I'm thinking about these things now. So my first website was actually a hand-coded HTML site I built in 2002. It was called CCM Glass, Cameron, Casey, and Michelle Glass. And those are the names of my siblings. And I had bought an HTML book, and I brought it up to our family's cabin on Lopez Island in Washington State. And I was reading it, thinking it was super cool, and I wanted to create a business that sold the beach glass that we would find on the beaches up there. And I didn't have a computer, though. And so when my cousin came to visit, I asked to borrow his computer, and I spent some afternoons typing in the examples that I found in this book. It was amazing to watch the website come to life as I would hit refresh, make some changes, hit refresh again. And it was amazing. That was kind of my first foray into the web. Unfortunately, CCM Glass never got a single order because there was no order capability. You had to print out there was no code behind the scenes. It was all HTML. But that was my first foray. One thing, too, that I want to talk about specifically around deployment, though, is that this was really just deployed by copying and pasting the files up to an FTP server. So it was a free hosting provider I managed to find, which were pretty rare back in those days, powered by ads, and then copied up via FTP. So fast forward a couple of years, in between 2004 and 2010, I picked up PHP. Obviously, PHP is a lot more dynamic. You can do more things with it. You're able to store and retrieve data from MySQL. There's sort of built-in primitives in PHP that let you do stuff like that. I created a calendar app for my high school, which they didn't end up using. It was like sort of a display all of the events that are currently happening or will happen that are coming up on the school's calendar. That was created in PHP and stored data in a MySQL database. And by the way, this is also sort of pre-object-oriented PHP, so it's like C for the web, just a bunch of function calls everywhere. And also, this is still deployed via FTP, so we're talking about just dragging some files off your file system and using something like FileZilla, and they appear on the server, and then the site is up. Fast forward a few more years, I got my first real job at Fluther in 2010. This was my first job out of college. It was a Django app, which is Python. Had a MySQL database, and a couple other sort of more specialized things. It had a Solr full-text search engine, and that database I mentioned, and we deployed it using Capistrano. Now, that's a little bit weird, because the shop was a Python shop, but we were using a Ruby tool to deploy. I think that kind of tells you something about the ecosystem back then. Not a lot of attention, I don't think, was being paid to deployment in the Python world. Only sort of a little bit, I think, was paid in the Ruby world, and that's why we really only have one tool at that point, Capistrano. I remember one of my bosses sort of explaining to me what a Ruby symbol was, and both of us laughing because we were like, why don't we just use strings, ha ha ha, right? Fast forward another year, Fluther's acquired by Twitter, and I discovered sort of how you deploy things at scale. So Twitter had at the time, I think probably still does, maybe even more than thousands of app servers, and they had used Capistrano for a long time because it was a Rails app back in the old days. But eventually that became untenable to use. It was too slow. So the company wrote its own tool called, unfortunately, Murder. Murder is also the name for a flock of crows. And everything at Twitter had a bird name. And so the tool was called Murder. It was really interesting, though, this deploy tool, because it used the BitTorrent protocol. Now, you laugh, You laugh. But it really worked well. The first server would seed the version, and then all the other servers would pull from each other until each of them had a copy of the code. This put a lot less pressure on the Git server. So instead of pulling from the Git server, thousands of app servers trying to reach the Git server at the same time, instead they would pull from each other, and that ended up deploying in much less time and with much less load on the server. Fast forward a few years, Twitter decided to move to something called Mesos. Mesos is a pretty interesting system. It predates Kubernetes by a number of years, I think 2 or 3 years, but it does a lot of the same things that Kubernetes does. Their tagline for a long time was, program against your data center like it's a single pool of resources. So whereas Capistrano focuses on individual servers, Mesos and Kubernetes, as we'll learn soon, focus on your cluster as one single set of resources. Twitter had a lot of different services too. So we had geolocation, photos, twitter.com, a bunch of other services to manage login, things like that. And all these services were managed by different teams and needed to be deployed separately. And what Mesos let us do is isolate each of these individual services from the other services that were running on the same host. So you could potentially run on the same, your twitter.com deployment called Macaw could run on the same host as the geolocation service called RockDove, but you, as the deployer of both of those things, potentially would never know that they were running on the same host, because all you would do is deploy your Mesos configuration. It would run what you wanted it to run, and you would see some log output, but you wouldn't actually know what physical host it was running on. So fast forward another couple years, I'm at Lumos Labs. We started out with VPSs, so virtual private servers in SoftLayer. We used a bespoke Capistrano setup and some Chef scripts to automate that. We deployed using this in-house tool called Catapult. In 2015, we switched to EC2, in AWS, still deploying with Capistrano. In 2016, we switched to Docker and ECS, the Elastic Container Service. And then finally, and that was deployed using a tool called Broadside. And then finally, in 2017, we switched to Kubernetes. All right, now to the present. So I work at GitHub now. We have the main monolith called .com that runs with Kubernetes deployed via a chat ops system that we have running in Slack. Other services that are not .com, if they are sort of .com adjacent, we have a self-service Kubernetes-based framework called Moda. But the important thing here is that Kubernetes is the platform that we're using. And the reason that I think it's important to reiterate this, or to say this right now, is because all of these tools that we have on top of it, talking about Moda and chat ops, is that tooling abstracts away the details of Kubernetes and just lets the developer just run some commands and deploy the app. And to me, abstracting away the details of deployment, specifically around Kubernetes, is sort of the key to effectively using Kubernetes. It's a little too complicated, I think, for the average developer to really grok and to understand all of. I've been working with it for years, and I still don't understand more than probably 10% of it. So this is the journey that I've gone into. I started with FTP. That's an actual screenshot from FileZilla up there. I would literally drag files from my file system in Windows Explorer over to that remote window there and would copy the files up. And then I ended in 2017/2022 with Docker and Kubernetes. So that's my journey through deployment, and that's why I'm trying to bring Kubernetes to the Rails world, because I think it's a lot more full-featured than what we have now. And also to reiterate, Rails does not have an official tool or guide that helps you deploy an app to production. We have all these other things: active record, action cable, action mailbox, active job, action text, active storage, all these wonderful frameworks that are part of Rails. But for some reason, we still don't have active deployment. So let's talk about what I want, and probably what you want from active deployment. Well, first of all, I want it to run my app. I think that's pretty obvious. I want it to run my app on a remote server. Let me hit it with my web browser. I want it to be easy to use. I want it to be so easy that I don't have to think about it 99% of the time. I think the config should be easy to read as well. I want to be able to bring my own infrastructure, just like I can do with Capistrano. So I spin up an EC2 instance, or I spin up a Linode node, or a droplet in DigitalOcean. And then I also want it to be Rails native. I want it to be built for Rails, I want it to be built in Ruby so that I don't have to learn a new language or a new tool. Well, a new language specifically. There's some other things that would be really nice too, because right now we can do all those things with Capistrano. I would love it to provision SSL and TLS certificates for me. I'd love it to rotate those automatically so I don't have to think about that. I would love it to manage a database for me, just the way that Heroku does. I would love to be able to spin up some Sidekick workers really easily without having to make a bunch of changes to my proc file or whatever. It would be really cool if it automatically stood up a static asset server, so none of my assets were being served from the Rails app, instead being served by Nginx or something. And I would also love to avoid that vendor lock-in problem that I talked about before. So basically, I want it to be as turnkey as Heroku, but as unrestricted as Capistrano. And we can look at what Rails devs are currently using in production thanks to Planet Argon's survey that they run every 2 years. And you can see that where we are now as a Rails community is we're still very much on Capistrano. That's has lost a little bit of ground over the last couple of years. It looks like I see Git on that list. To me, Git and Capistrano aren't really the same thing, but I think I see what they're saying. I think this is like a pulling straight from Git, potentially from a GitHub action or something. And then I think continuous deployment is probably other pay-for continuous deployment solutions. But Capistrano is still really high on that list. So I want to take a survey. Who in this room uses or has used Capistrano to deploy an application? Yeah, nice. OK, that's probably 75% of the room. Really quick, what's Capistrano in case you haven't heard of it or haven't used it? Capistrano is a server automation tool. It's really a way just to run SSH commands on a remote server. It's written in Ruby. You connect to the server using SSH, so you have to have SSH keys on your laptop in order to connect. And then you can run commands such as create this folder where my code will live. Here's a command to restart the application server, et cetera. Under the hood, it actually uses rake tasks. It builds on top of rake and adds a bunch of Capistrano-specific rake tasks that make deployment easy, or easy-ish. Why have we as a community gravitated and still do gravitate toward Capistrano? Well, it's really simple. It's just rake tasks. It's just SSH. We all know those tools. We all know the command line. So it makes a lot of sense that we would gravitate toward a tool that lets us use the command line and SSH. It's really flexible. If you can run a command to do something, you can automate it using Capistrano. It's really established. We've got years of practice using it as a community. With lots of prior art, lots of articles written about it. And it's independent. There's no vendor lock-in. You write your own automation scripts on your own bare metal server. And then I think this is a really key differentiator too, in that it's written in Ruby, the language that we all know and love. But why not Capistrano? So for one thing, a lot of the work that you might do in provisioning a server is bespoke. You have to do some things yourself. You have to tell it how to restart your application server. You would need to tell it potentially how to log rotate, things like that. It's imperative. So these scripts that I'm running, these tasks that I'm running in Capistrano, depend on the state of the server being in a certain state. Can you always rely on that being true? Well, maybe not, because you can go in there yourself, SSH in, make some changes, and then now that's invalidated some of the assumptions that your script maybe thinks are true. It's also not portable. What happens if you want to upgrade your operating system? There was a really interesting case that I ran into at Lumos where we wanted to update Ruby, but we couldn't because we couldn't update GCC, and we couldn't update GCC because we needed to update CentOS. And so all of that meant that we just literally had only one server in our fleet that still ran Ruby 2.6, and everything else ran 2.7, because we literally couldn't upgrade. We were also very scared to upgrade it because there was a lot of custom stuff on that server that we hadn't automated yet. And last but not least, Capistrano is server-focused. So we talked about that problem deploying to many different app servers that Twitter had, because the cluster wasn't thought of as a bunch of resources. Instead, it was Capistrano thinks of the servers as individual machines. So when I think about deployment, I think of layers of abstraction. So right now, we're right here. Capistrano is really just an automation layer over the top of SSH and maybe FTP. Wouldn't it be nice if we were here instead? And so that's what I want active deployment to be. I want active deployment to be something that uses Kubernetes. Let's find out why. Why should we use Kubernetes instead of using Capistrano and bare metal servers? Well, first of all, First of all, Kubernetes provides a true platform. We can run all kinds of things on it. We don't need to set those up ourselves. It's declarative. You tell Kubernetes what you want, not how to do it. Once you've told it that, it figures out the how for you. It's portable. You can talk to any cloud or deploy to any cloud server using the same Kubernetes configuration with almost no changes. I would say in most cases, no changes at all. And it's cluster focused. So your whole cluster is treated as a single resource you can deploy to. And just like we talked about with Mesos, it will deploy different parts of your stack to different servers depending on where the capacity is. And it's resilient. Kubernetes will restart failed processes automatically. If your server dies, it brings it back up without you having to lift a finger, or to have to run something like supervisor D. If you learn that, configure it. And last but not least, Kubernetes is scalable. You can scale your number of web workers on demand, your number of Sidekick workers on demand. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Kuby. So Kuby is an active deployment setup for Rails apps. You can see where I got the logo from. So it's the Rails logo plus the Kubernetes logo equals the Kuby logo. Here's what Kuby is, what I want it to be. It's active deployment for Rails apps. So what does it do? It packages up and deploys your Rails app into a Docker image and then deploys it to a Kubernetes cluster. It has really minimal and easy to read configuration. It supports 4 of the major cloud vendors out there. And that includes DigitalOcean, Linode, EKS, which is Amazon's Elastic Kubernetes service, and Azure. A couple more things, though, that are really nice about Kuby. For one thing, it's Rails native. It's a gem that you install in your gem file like everything else. It deploys the secrets in your credentials.yaml file. So if you have credential secrets, then those automatically are available to your app without you having to do anything else. It'll automatically stand up a database instance for you. It creates that static asset server that we talked about, so your assets are served by Nginx instead of by Rails itself. And it also acquires SSL or TLS certificates for your domain automatically using Let's Encrypt. Here's what your config looks like if you just run the Rails generator today. So the first thing you have is a define statement. This is the very top level. So this is defining my application. I have an environment called production. You can have multiple environments, staging, test, whatever. There's a Docker section. Inside the Docker section, you would specify your credentials for talking and pushing to a Docker registry. So this is the same idea as a package registry, like with Ruby gems, but this is for Docker images. Popular ones include GitHub's own Docker registry. There's also one with GitLab. There's the canonical one, which is Docker Hub. So you create an account with those, put these credentials in here. You have an image URL. This is the image that the Kubernetes or the Docker image that you're building. It's going to be tagged with this URL and then pushed to that URL. And there's the last section is the Kubernetes section. This is really simple. We're going to add the Rails app plugin. Most functionality in Kuby is developed via plugins. I'm going to specify that I want to deploy this to a Linode Kubernetes cluster. There's a couple of config options that are specific to Linode, cluster ID and access token. You can get both those things from their interface. And that's pretty much it. So how do we deploy this now that we have our config set up? So your first deploy looks something like this. First, you'll run the setup command. This will install operators, Helm charts, everything you need to deploy your app, stuff that is cluster-wide. You'll run the build command. This will build your Rails application into a Docker image. Run push. We'll push that image to the registry we talked about. And then last but not least, run the deploy command, and that will deploy that recently built image into the cluster. This is kind of what a deploy looks like. It's using a tool called Crane from Shopify, which is a really nice tool for deploying apps using Kubernetes. It's a little outdated of a GIF because I didn't have time to re-record it. This is the one actually from the docs. It looks a little different now, but very similar. Remember, though, that Kubernetes is a true platform, which means we can do a lot of awesome things with it that we maybe couldn't do with Capistrano or couldn't do easily. So Kuby, as I mentioned before, features a really robust plugin system. So let's look at some of the plugins that it supports. So we have Kuby Redis. We can stand up our own Redis instances if we want to in our cluster. Sidekick, which uses the Kuby Redis gem. You can add background workers in just a few lines of code to your config. There's a gem I wrote called Pre-Bundler, which speeds up bundle install in Docker images. Previews, this one's not quite ready yet, but I thought I'd talk about it anyway. a gem to deploy a copy of your app per pull request. Yeah, Joel's nodding. We wanted to do that at GitHub. And then the only community contributed one so far from the guys at Evil Martians called Kuby Anycable, which deploys the Go-based RPC components for Anycable into your cluster. So let's go ahead and try to add Sidekick to our config that we just looked at. So I won't show the whole config, I'll just kind of show what's different here. So inside the Kubernetes section, you would add this, you make this add plugin call. First you'd add this gem to your gem file, require it, then add plugin Sidekick, and then configure, say I want to run 2 different workers, that's what replicas means. And then once that's finished, you would create an initializer. Kuby has all the parameters you would need to connect to that Redis instance. You can stick this in config initializers sidekick.rb. And then to deploy it, we'd run setup again because we added a plugin. So we need to install the Redis operator. It's not important what that is, but we need to make sure that it's available. And then build, push, and deploy just like we did before. And that's how you would add Sidekick. So just a couple lines of code, and you've got Sidekick workers. So to reiterate a little bit about the platform here, so what did we get with Capistrano? Well, all we really needed, all we had to work with, was a server running FTP or an SSH daemon. That's really all you have. Anything's possible, but you as the developer have to set up most things yourself. With Kubernetes, we have a lot more to work with. And when I say we, I mean Kuby has a lot more to work with on your behalf. So we have, obviously, the container scheduler part, so it'll run your code, scaling and fault tolerance. There's a networking layer, automatic load balancing, ingress and egress, so taking a request from the outside world and routing it into your app somewhere. It also features this a persistent storage API and also role-based access control so that you can prevent the marketing department from messing with it, for example. Other things you can do also with Kuby, so that's the platform of Kubernetes, and it enables all of the functionality that I've just talked about. Here's some other things you can do with Kubernetes or with Kuby also. You can get logs from your web pod. You can start up a remote shell. So this is just like SSH, but it's using Kubernetes kube-controlled exec. You can get a remote Rails console. You can get a remote database console. And you can also run arbitrary kube control commands. Kube control, by the way, is this tool that you use to communicate with a cluster. And obviously a lot more as well. So where can you go to learn more about Kuby? Well, so the main website is getkuby.io. There's also the Get Kuby GitHub organization. And this is the main repo that sort of acts as the kernel for all these other gems. Kuby, also, I need help with it. Let's make awesome things together. I'm the only person that's working on it so far. It's a lot of work. I would love more people to hop on board, help me out with it. Here's getkuby.io. Head over there. It's got all of the documentation you would want. And hopefully, you'll start deploying apps with Kuby. So thanks so much. OK, so I have like 1 minute and 54 seconds for questions, if there are any. In the back there? The question is, can you locally test a deployment using Minikube on your laptop? The answer is yes. You can use the bare metal provider for that. So we looked at the Linode provider, DigitalOcean. There's also a bare metal one, so it just means you bring your own kube config. You can also use a tool called Kind. Kind is a local cluster runner that you can just install on your machine. It uses Docker and spins up a whole cluster on your Docker, your locally running Docker. There's information on that. Go to github/getkuby/kubykind, and you can set that up as a provider. Cool. What else we got? What's next for Kuby? Oh, boy. The sky's the limit. I don't know. I mean, so previews I really want to make work. And I think that there's also needs to be a good upgrade story. Right now, it's still only like I would say pre-alpha, pre-beta. So the next step would be to make sure that upgrade story is good. So when you deploy to your cluster with one version, you can issue an upgrade command and get the new hotness from the next version. Yeah, I mean, and of course, like maybe some metrics, so Prometheus or something for metrics. Who knows? There's lots of possibilities. Yeah, good question. The question was, can you create a config map? In Kubernetes, a config map is just a mapping of usually environment variables. You can also put entire files into it. You can create config maps in Kuby. Yeah, you can specify environment variables. There's a documentation example on getkuby.io. You can also create your own config maps if you want to using the DSL under the hood. Yeah. OK, we have time for like one more. Yes? Right, so the question was, is there a way how does Kuby support migrations, especially not backwards compatible ones? Right now, Kuby just runs your migrations automatically, so it'll just run db migrate whenever you deploy a new version. For many reasons, such as not backwards compatible migrations, that's probably not enough. That's what it currently does, though, so we could definitely make that better. OK, that's all the time I have. Thanks, guys.